I wouldn't even think about that. I'd just be like, that's funny. This guy is peeing out of his butt for some reason. Oh my God, he must be a veteran. Thank you for your service. I'm not indifferent to people suffering because I know it's hard to be everybody. We blacks, we just got our first big holiday in a long time. Happy belated Juneteenth to the blacks. Juneteenth is a strange holiday, isn't it? It commemorates when black people in Texarkana area of the country first found out they were free. But remember, they were free when they found out. They just didn't know it yet. Very, very interesting holiday. You know, I learned something. This is a wild story. I learned this past Juneteenth of a story that's true, and there was a black man who was in South Carolina during slavery who somehow got granted his freedom by his so-called master. And when his master granted him the freedom, he also gave him a plot of land. Now, it turns out this brother was brilliant. He had a good eye, a good knack for farming. And he farmed this plot of land very successfully and made a lot of money. And this is where the story gets crazy. When he got all that money, this nigga bought some slaves. You ever heard this before? This is a true story. Not only was he a slave owner, he became a slave breeder and employed tactics that were so cruel, even white slave owners were like, yo, my man. He was a wild dude, but he did it just because that's what successful people did at the time, and he just wanted to be down. What a fucking tragedy. How can a person that went through slavery perpetrate the same evil on a person that looks just like him? It's mind-blowing. And, shockingly, they're making a movie about him. Ironically, it's called Space Juice. Space Juice. The point of that story is this person was invested in a construct. That was the construct of successful people, and he just followed the roadmap of successful people. He followed what they call an incentive. Now, everyone struggles, but I'm very invested in the gender construct, personally, because I'm a man with kids and a wife, and I like that warm, wet, soft pussy that my wife has. This does not mean that I feel like another point of view can't exist. I was doing a nightclub in Oakland 16 years ago, and this is the first time that the trans community ever got mad at me that I knew about. And I was nobody. I just quit Chappelle's show. It was like a nothing hole-in-the-wall club, and I was doing some transgender jokes in Oakland. It was 16 years ago. My pronoun game was not as nice as it is today. I went too far. I said things like tranny and shit. I didn't know these words were bad. And a woman stood up and just gave me the business. Started screaming at me. And I'm sure it was a woman. But she kept calling me transphobic and all this shit. I'd never even heard these words before. It's really weird. I didn't trip. I just gave security the look like, get that bitch out of here. I kept it moving. And then she went to the press, and the next day, one of the gay papers wrote all the same things she had said to me about me in the paper. Misquoted the jokes and was calling me transphobic. And again, all these words, I'd never heard them before. But every time that I talked with anybody from that community since, they always repeat the talking points from that article. My least favorite of which being, and I hate this phrase, they say I was punching down on them. Punching down. The fuck does that mean? Now, fast forward. It's 2019. I'm in a restaurant in Ohio, a very nice restaurant. It's Thanksgiving week. And to be honest, it's not a very nice restaurant, but it's a nice restaurant if you're a white person from Ohio that's never been anywhere before. Picture Chili's. I'm sitting at the bar, I'm having a drink by myself, and the only other person in the bar is a woman, a couple stools down, and she was alone, and she was older, and that made me feel sad, because it was the holidays. So I told the bartender, send that woman a drink on me. She's trying to spread the cheer, and I wish I didn't. This woman wanted to talk. She wasn't mean, she was nice, but she just wanted to talk about shit that, you know what I mean, a nigga that's trying to get drunk, don't want to hear about this bitch remodeling her bathroom, and I'm sitting there trying to be polite. Oh, subway tiles, word. But then she hits a lick, piqued my interest. She says, my daughter is coming home for the holidays. Oh, that's great news. I'm glad you're not going to be alone. And then she goes on and on about how great her daughter is. I guess her daughter got a new agent, and she's out in Hollywood, she's in movies and on television and all this stuff. And as she's telling me this, I'm thinking, this woman is so sweet. She probably doesn't even know who I am or what I do for a living. Because I know what your daughter's out in Hollywood doing. And then she goes, would you like to see her picture? Oh, now I don't want to see this woman's picture, but what am I going to do? I go, okay, yeah, sure, I'd love to see the picture. And I grab the picture, and this is all I say. Oh, she's very beautiful. And as she puts the picture away, she looks mean all of a sudden, like she caught me in some kind of trap. What does that face mean? And then she goes, she's transgender. And I think to myself, oh, this bitch does know who I am. I really resented that trap because that trap doesn't let me be honest. If I was honest, I wouldn't fall for it. I just looked at the picture like, ooh, look at that big chiseled jawline, that big thick Joe Rogan neck. Is that a dude? Is your daughter a man? Can't say that shit. It's really annoying. Fast forward, now it's a couple days later. It's the Wednesday. For the Thursday, that's Thanksgiving, and I'm in a totally different bar. And this bar, trust me, it's not a nice place. It's foul. It's one of those bars where the top shelf should be under the sink. This is where the poor whites drink, the tiki torch whites. You know what I mean? Them white people, they believe in Q and they love Trump. You know what I mean? Like Michigan white people. I remember I was at this bar one time. This is that kind of bar it is. I was in there one time, I was fucked up. And I turned around to everybody in the bar, I go, hey, everybody, I'm gonna buy everyone in the bar around the drinks. And all the motherfuckers like, hoorah! And the bartender knew I was drunk, so she pulled me aside. Mr. Chappelle, are you sure about that? That's going to be $16. Tough time for the whites. And this was a holiday weekend, you know what I mean? These motherfuckers was having a rootin' tootin' time. They was in there partying, making all them noises. Woo! Ow! Yow! You know all them noises white people make before lynching? They was doing all that shit. I was drunk. I looked over my shoulder. I thought I was tripping. I guess who was in the bar? I thought I was seeing things. I looked across the room, and I saw the trans bitch from the picture. I couldn't believe it. I said, what is a trans person doing in a place like this? This is very dangerous behavior. And she was with two big, buff, gay black dudes. I didn't know these dudes, but I know they was gay. If they had a dick in their mouth, they wouldn't look any gayer than they did just sitting there. They had 1980s gay face. You know what that is? Remember in the 80s when gay people looked surprised all the time? Close your mouth, nigga. What's surprising? You know what I mean? But they was huge. They looked like Juicy Smouille's trainers. And I'm thinking, man, these motherfuckers in a line of trouble. So what I do is I stand up And everybody in the bar likes me, so I make a big show of it to make sure that everyone can hear me. I walk right up to her, and I go, hey, I just met your mother the other night, and she told me all the great things you're doing in Hollywood, and I cannot believe that someone from a podunk place like this can achieve all that. I'm so proud of you. Welcome home. And the whole bar said, hoorah. And I said, whoosh. That ought to buy her some time. You know what I mean? A couple more drinks and these fellas are gonna start asking her for some pussy she might not have. And she was very gracious. She said, thank you so much. And we shook hands. And as she was shaking my hand, her face turned mean like her mom's. And she said, do you mind not punching down on my people? Oh, I don't like that. Normally I would have let it go, but I was drunk. I said, what might you mean, bitch? I was careful to call her a bitch because I didn't want to blow her cover. Turns out she wasn't hiding. She was loud, she was proud. She let me have it in front of everybody. Screaming at me all the talking points from that article. You transphobic, this and that. Kept clapping her hands in my face. Let me tell you something. I said, where you learned this from? Black bitches kept doing, let me tell you something, honey. So annoying. She kept calling transgenders her people. Isn't that weird? My people this, my people that. I said, what do you mean your people? Was y'all kidnapped in Transylvania and brought here as slaves? She said, my people have struggled for decades, honey. Decades. And I looked at them gay black dudes like, is there anything you niggas need to tell this bitch? Clifford. I'm exaggerating. She's actually a very nice person, and I'm cool with her now, but boy, that shit got on my nerves. And it got on my nerves because whenever someone says that to me, I know they've never seen me for themselves. They just repeat what they've heard. Any of you who have ever watched me know that I have never had a problem with transgender people. If you listen to what I'm saying, clearly, my problem has always been with white people. Okay, I've been through this before. I had a friend from high school. Now, in high school, this guy was a thug, right? He was a fucking dope boy. He did it all. He's a wild dude. People used to be very scared of him. And then after high school, word on the street was he'd come out the closet. I personally didn't believe it. I bring him up because last year, he calls me out of the blue like, yo, what's up, man? I got your number from so-and-so, and I heard you're gonna be in New York doing a show. Could I get some tickets? I was like, fuck yeah, get some tickets, man. How you been? He said, well, we'll catch up at the show, man, but yo, I appreciate it. I'll see you soon. I said, all right, man, take care. And I was about to hang up, and I couldn't resist. I was just like, hey, nigga, I heard you was gay. What's going on with that? And I wish I didn't ask, because he sounded like he was dying to talk about that shit. And he had a long story about it. And it's not that I didn't care, but I was, I don't like talking on the phone. I was watching TV at the same time. So I just wasn't really paying attention like I should. But I was trying to sound supportive, but I didn't really know what to say. So I was just like mumbling shit throughout this conversation. I was just like, nigga, you gay, man. You just gay. This went on for a while, and then finally I had to say something like definitive to get him off the phone. And I was like, hey, man, you know what? Don't let people get you down, all right? And the next time someone tries to make you feel bad about yourself, just remember, everybody fucks funny to somebody. He didn't like that shit. He's like, what the fuck does that mean? I said, huh? He said, you saying I fuck funny, motherfucker? I said, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying everybody's different. He said, you ain't say different, nigga. You say it funny. What's so fucking funny about the way I fuck? And I said, hey, man, I fuck feet. He said, what? Oh, this is not a joke, ladies and gentlemen. I get women to squeeze their feet together like this, and I fuck them right in that little space in their feet. But you can't build a community behind that shit. There's no flag for us. That shit made him laugh. And the next day, after the show, I saw him backstage. He was like, yo, what's up, man? I'm like, oh, shit, what's going on? And he had his buddy with him. He goes, Dave, I want you to meet Manuel. Manuel's my fiance. We're in New York getting married because it's legal here. I said, well, congratulations, fellas. And Manuel was like, gracias. And he went to go get some drinks. And then my buddy looked at me. He was like, so, Dave, what do you think? And I started mumbling again. You gay, nigga, you know, you just gay. He said, yeah, I'm a little nervous about getting married, man. It's a big step. I said, yeah, it is. It's a big step. He said, well, you've been married for a while. You got any advice for us? No, I'm married to a woman. Sorry about that. And they corrected me. He said, no, you married the person that you love. So it's essentially the same. I said, you know, man, the problem with that statement is that it makes the assumption that I love her. But you guys lighten the fuck up. Of course I love my wife. She laughs at this shit. As a matter of fact, she eats and spends this shit. You know what I told him? I told him, I said, you know what you should do, man? First of all, you shouldn't do it. I'm talking about being legally married. It's not that you're gay as much as just legal marriage is a fucking diabolical leverage game in the United States. I'm just being honest. Devoid of religious significance or the idea of love, marriage is nothing but an awful contract that you shouldn't sign. I'm just being real. Because you start out loving each other, and then like 2 years later, you're just building a case against one another for a hypothetical court date that may or may not ever happen. You throw being gay on top of that, that shit is explosive. Like it's that Ray Rice shit. Okay, right after Ray Rice went through all that shit, I was at a party and I met this kid, Michael Sams. You know Michael Sams? Very nice guy. He's the first openly gay NFL player. And Mike's a very nice guy, a very brave guy. But when I met him, I couldn't help but thinking, now what's gonna happen when Michael Sams beats his wife up in the elevator? Is that domestic violence, or is that just two niggas working shit out in the elevator? You know what I mean? No, this motherfucker's about to eat, and they'll just come running. Baba got me through a very difficult time in my marriage. We spend the most time together. Like, it's not that me and my wife don't spend time together, but we've been married so long, it's like we don't talk like, I don't know if anyone's married here, but if after 10 years, all that chatty shit goes away. You've said it all. You know what I mean? It's just, yeah, we're just in the zone. She says the same shit to me every night before she goes to bed. I'll be the last one up. She's like, I'm gonna get some sleep, Dave. Good night. All right, babe, we'll stay up and watch television. Good night. And she'll walk halfway up the steps. David? Don't eat the kids' lunch. And then she walks away. Well, the crazy shit is I don't even eat their lunch anymore. Back in the day, I used to eat that shit. You know how that goes. I might smoke some weed in the middle of the night, and she'll leave neatly wrapped sandwiches all over the kitchen. I'm gonna eat it. What's the big deal? Why can't she just make another one in the morning? I mean, it's like, I got sons anyway. And sons love everything their dads do. My kids would be at school the next day, just look like, oh, Dad bit my sandwich. Oh, shit! Their dad is Dave Chappelle, man. You could trade that sandwich. He said, it's the 4th time this week. I'm tired of this sandwich biting bitch. I said, stop using that word. Let's go home. That's a quiet car ride home. We got to the house, he just ran right up to his room, slammed the door. His mother came downstairs. By then, she had heard about everything. She was looking at me like, oh my God. I said, I know, it's fucked up. She said, you bit that goddamn sandwich, didn't you, Dad? I said, I'm tired of you accusing me of shit. And I just ran out of the house, jumped in my car and drove off. Of course I bit that sandwich. But I knew that she was just really mad about that tape, so now she's gonna punish me about a fucking sandwich I bit. And I was mad as fuck. You know what I said to myself? I said, I should just never go home. Fuck this shit. You know, by the way, that's how people used to get divorced in the 40s. There wasn't no divorce court in America. Back in those days, if you want to get out your marriage, you just tell your wife, hey, baby, I'm going to get a pack of cigarettes. I'll be right back. You would just leave with the clothes on your back. That's when men were men. And there was no internet back then, so you could move 11 miles away and have a whole new life. But I ended up going back home. Late at night, I came in the room and she was actually changing for bed. You can always tell your wife is mad at you when they cover their titties up when you walk in. Oh. Let those titties out, it's me, baby. Can we just talk about this for a minute? She said, David, there's nothing to talk about. I already know you bit the sandwich. And don't go looking for the lunch, I hid it. I said, I don't want to talk about the sandwich, baby. I want to talk about it. The tape. I know that's why you're mad. It was a very difficult conversation. I had to crack a few jokes, and she laughed a little, and I helped her relax. And we started talking, and then she cracked a few jokes that hurt my feelings, honestly, but... We talked, and you know what she told me? She told me that she was madder about the second extortion tape than she was about the first one. Which doesn't make sense at all. What's wrong with a guy touching his own private parts? It's my own business. It's not like I do it all the time. As a matter of fact, sometimes I do it for her benefit. A lot of guys do this. It's called the mercy jerk. That's the one that happens in the middle of the night when you're about to roll on top of it and you see her face and you're like, she looks tired. That takes a lot of love and discipline to back out of a room with a rock-hard dick. Sometimes I don't make it. Uh-oh. Someone fell asleep with their socks off, didn't they? You can't rape feet. You can't rape feet. Only time I jerk off now is if I know how long she'll be gone. It's the only way I can get my head in the game. Sometimes she'll tell me, Dave, I'm going to take the kid to my mom real quick. Probably be back in a couple of hours. A couple hours? You can get a good one in 2 hours. That's the kind of session where you'll take all your clothes off. I'll be butt naked in the living room like, get these fucking toys out of my way. Disgusting. Foot all on the coffee table. I'm just stroking it out and taking my time. And I got a bowl of cereal waiting for me right here. That's when you have the privacy, you can have a loud orgasm. I miss those. Ah! 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 You know, when a guy busts a nut, like right after that, there's a window of like 6 minutes where he does the most rational thing he ever does. That's when he's always horrified. Ah! Naturally, I'm a shy person, naturally. And I used to get my hair cut on a barbershop in 15th Street Northeast, and I would go there, and everyone in the barbershop would just snap on each other. And I'd sit in the corner, and I'd watch everybody and just listen to all these jokes. The guys were funny as shit, but one day, after a few weeks of going there getting my hair cut, they turned the jokes on me. I call that day the barbershop massacre. I lit everybody in that barbershop up. I've been sitting in there listening to for weeks talk about each other. I knew every inside joke about each and every one of them, and they couldn't believe I knew. And from then on in the neighborhood, people kind of like me. Oh, those guys. That I don't know that I've seen since I left this school. I can remember, and I won't say names, there was a student that went here that used to sell drugs. It wasn't just a student, but this particular guy. This particular guy did the cardinal no-no on the streets. He did what they call not making your roll, which meant that he got some drugs on consignment and he didn't pay whoever gave him the drugs back. And whoever gave him those drugs had declared, I'm gonna come to that school and I'm gonna kill you, he said. And my man was scared. And the word got around school, that the goons was coming. And by the time the goons showed up, every dude that went to this school, gay, straight, whatever the fuck, was all standing out front. They said, you have to kill all of us. And who was in front of all of them? Roger Bellamy with some leg warmers on like this. I didn't have the suspicion that most new kids get. I was an oddity, a new toy. I was quirky. I wasn't a snappy dresser. I didn't really know what the fuck was going on because the crack epidemic itself was new to me, and they were all refugees from their neighborhood schools. In the morning, we would have our academic classes, and then in the afternoon, we would have our arts classes. It was a long school day. We started at 8:30. We wouldn't leave here at 5, sometimes 5:30, whenever they saw fit. It's funny walking in here tonight, because I saw the pride flags up. And I remember when I came here all those years ago, it's the first time I'd ever met a kid who was just like gay. And was never strange to us. Their sexuality or their gender identity was the least remarkable thing about a person that could dance as well as Roger Bellamy or there was no distinction between any of that. Everybody was weird in their own way. And in a very strange way, because we spent so much time with one another, we helped raise one another. Not to get his approval, but to avoid his disapproval. When we were coming up, they had a thing called juries. I don't know, do they still do juries? Juries is when all the department heads give you a piece to work on and they sit there and they make you perform the piece, and the criticism is brutal. We were kids. We didn't understand that they were preparing us for a hard world ahead. If you wanted a profession in art, they would tear us to shreds. The stress of a jury, and man, I never practiced. Naturally, I'm a shy person, naturally, and I used to get my hair cut on a barbershop in 15th Street Northeast, and I would go there, and everyone in the barbershop would just snap on each other. And I'd sit in the corner, and I'd watch everybody and just listen to all these jokes. The guys were funny as shit, but one day, after a few weeks of going there, getting my hair cut, they turned the jokes on me. I call that day the barbershop massacre. I lit everybody in that barbershop up. I've been sitting in there listening to for weeks talk about each other. I knew every inside joke about each and every one of them, and they couldn't believe I knew. And from then on in the neighborhood, people kind of like me. Oh, those guys. That I don't know that I've seen since I left this school. I can remember, and I won't say names, there was a student that went here that used to sell drugs. Well, it wasn't just a student, but this particular guy. This particular guy did the cardinal no-no on the streets. He did what they call not making your roll, which meant that he got some drugs on consignment and he didn't pay whoever gave him the drugs back. And whoever gave him those drugs had declared, I'm gonna come to that school and I'm gonna kill you, he said. And my man was scared. And the word got around school that the goons was coming. And by the time the goons showed up, every dude that went to this school, gay, straight, whatever the fuck, was all standing out front. They said, you have to kill all of us. And who was in front of all of them? Roger Bellamy with some leg warmers on like this. I didn't have the suspicion that most new kids get. I was an oddity, a new toy. I was quirky. I wasn't a snappy dresser. I didn't really know what the fuck was going on because the crack epidemic itself was new to me and they were all refugees from their neighborhood schools. In the morning, we would have our academic classes, and then in the afternoon, we would have our arts classes. It was a long school day. We started at 8:30. We wouldn't leave here till 5, sometimes 5:30, whenever they saw fit. It's funny walking in here tonight, because I saw the pride flags up. And I remember when I came here all those years ago, it's the first time I'd ever met a kid who was just like gay. And was never strange to us. Their sexuality or their gender identity was the least remarkable thing about a person that could dance as well as Roger Bellamy or there was no distinction between any of that. Everybody was weird in their own way. And in a very strange way, because we spent so much time with one another, we helped raise one another. Not to get his approval, but to avoid his disapproval. When we were coming up, they had a thing called juries. I don't know, do they still do juries? Juries is when all the department heads give you a piece to work on and they sit there and they make you perform the piece, and the criticism is brutal. We were kids. We didn't understand that they were preparing us for a hard world ahead. If you wanted a profession in art, they would tear us to shreds. The stress of a jury, and man, I never practiced. You remember what it was first like? When you first walked through the door, and it was in the afternoon, and everyone was in their arts classes, and the girls had tutus on, and everyone was weird and walking around the hallway like you weren't sure where anyone was supposed to be, and you could hear people practicing their horns and shit all through the hallways. There was art bouncing off the walls. The minute I walked through the door, there was a gallery of all these children's work, and these pictures were amazing. My first thought, when I walked through that door, I'm not good enough to be here. I've seen since I left this school. I can remember, and I won't say names, there was a student that went here that used to sell drugs. It wasn't just a student, but this particular guy. This particular guy did the cardinal no-no on the streets. He did what they call not making your roll, which meant that he got some drugs on consignment and he didn't pay whoever gave him the drugs back. And whoever gave him those drugs had declared, I'm gonna come to that school and I'm gonna kill you, he said. And my man was scared. And the word got around school, that the goons was coming. And by the time the goons showed up, every dude that went to this school, gay, straight, whatever the fuck, was all standing out front. They said, you have to kill all of us. And who was in front of all of them? Roger Bellamy with some leg warmers on like this. That changed the way I do comedy. That like turned a light switch on. It was two teachers. Donald Lease. Donald Lease, may he rest in peace. Maybe one of the single best educators that I've ever met in my life. He had a demeanor about himself that demanded excellence from his students. He would tell us incredible stories that I didn't believe. He claimed in one class, the song Killing Them Softly was about him. I was like, nah, nigga, not you. He told me he knew Donny Hathaway and Roberta Flack and all these people, these DC legends. He's a humble man, but he really demanded excellence. And he gave us a lecture once on the concept called polarization. Polarization meaning the idea that if you can make everybody look at the same thing at the same time, that their rational mind will decrease and their emotional response will increase. He said that's how audiences work, that's how mobs work, that's how you make a person lose themselves in the crowd. I got it. As he was saying this, he would hold a staple in his hand. It was a good lecture. He said, everyone focus on the staple, and then he would explain to us what polarization is as we're all looking at the staple, and then he'd scream, ha! And everyone would jump, oh! And he said, what you scared of? Oh, shit, that works. And ever since he did that lecture, I listened in his class intently. He was one of the only guys that I would always get straight A's from because I worked very hard, not to get his approval, but to avoid his disapproval. When we were coming up, they had a thing called juries. I don't know, do they still do juries? Juries is when all the department heads give you a piece to work on and they sit there and they make you perform the piece, and the criticism is brutal. We were kids. We didn't understand that they were preparing us for a hard world ahead. If you wanted a profession in art, they would tear us to shreds. The stress of a jury, and man, I never practiced. Because I didn't want to act. At an improv class, a teacher named Geraldine Gilstrap told me that I should stop doing funny pieces. That I should try to stretch myself artistically. And maybe I had more in me than comedy. And at the time, I took offense to that. So because she said that, after school that very night, I went to the comedy club. For the first time, I signed the list, and I waited, and I got on, and I killed it. Killed it. Must have been 35 years ago, night after night, I killed it. I'd show up with a bag of tricks that I learned at school, and I would dominate adults on a regular basis. Couldn't wait to get out of DC. When I was 17, I moved to New York. and lit that comedy scene up. I was obviously talented. You'll hear stories about people saying that I discovered Dave Chappelle. That's like saying you discovered sunshine. I was shining on everybody. And when I got in that professional world, I was oddly prepared. I had a sense of professionalism. I showed up on time. I did the things that I learned in school to do, just the basics. But my career didn't have any direction because I was still so young. And that didn't change for many years. It didn't change until my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, told me she was pregnant. And I was like, you know what? I should really start taking this seriously. When she told me that, before the baby was born, I had done my first HBO special, and then I went to work on a sketch comedy show idea I had, and Chappelle show came out. When my son was still maybe 18 months, he was years old. And I bet on myself. I took less money. I remember that, so I could do what I wanted to do. I said, you don't have to pay me that much, but you can't ever tell me that I can't do what I want to do. I did the first season, I'll tell you, for $300,000. Which sounds like a lot of money, but. It was a rare experience in my life because it was the first time that I did something that was so successful that I knew I had exceeded their expectations. I was more successful than I felt like I was supposed to be. They didn't plan on that. The second season came out and was a juggernaut, and then I remember this was the single best day of my career. The Rick James episode of Chappelle Show had come out. People were going crazy about the Rick James episode. At the same time, the DVD for season 1 of Chappelle Show dropped. It was the first time any television show had ever been sold off air, and it sold 1 million copies in the first day. It was unheard of. To this day, nothing has sold more than Chappelle Show. It's still on the top 10 in Netflix. All those great things happened, and my contract was up. Clearly, I was about to be rich. I'll spare you all the details of why it didn't work out. But it didn't work out. And I ended up doing something that no one had ever seen before, including myself. Maybe Prince is the only other guy that I've seen do this, where he just quit something that was popular when you're at the very top of it. Lucky for me, when I quit, I went to Africa, so there was a media storm that I didn't hear. By the time I got back, everyone was just looking at me crazy. That was a very difficult decision to make. The entire world told me I was crazy, but I was sure I was being true to myself and to something that I learned at Ellington. I'm one of those comedians that thought of himself as an artist. I was enamored by what the genre could do. It was like the pictures that I could paint with words and the way I could engage with audiences. I understood as it was happening. I was very lucky to be able to do this. And I protected that. And I knew that if I took the money, they would expect me to behave differently. And I wasn't willing to accept that. So I quit. And when I quit, it was a very difficult time in my life that I'll spare you the details, but man, fuck show business. It was tough. And then one day I was in Panama City, Panama, and I was at a hotel, and I looked at the lobby. There was a painting of Abraham Lincoln. And then I would look closer. It wasn't a painting. It was all pennies, just pennies, on a black canvas arranged into the face of Abraham Lincoln. And I asked the guy, I said, how much is that painting worth? He said, $600,000, sir. And I looked at the pennies that made up the painting, and I was like, that's like $300 worth of pennies. A light bulb went in my head. I realized the value of art. Some of the biggest wars and crimes and scandals in history were financed through the theft of art. Art is a powerful commodity. An artist, if you're good at it, should never behave as a commodity. That's a tough one. And then I gave up. I said, this is probably it. I accepted the fact that the career I thought I was going to have was over, but I started to rediscover just my art for its own sake. I would go to comedy clubs, and I worked for way less money than I ever had, and I enjoyed it more than any of the work I ever did. It was probably the best work I'll ever do, because it was so honest. It was so sincere. There was no media, there was no studio, there was no scrutiny, just me and the crowds. And I did it night after night, and slowly but surely the crowds got bigger and bigger. And then suddenly people started to notice, and Polestar would say, Dave Chappelle has the tour of the year. And again, and then the year after that, and then the year after that. And then Lorne Michaels asked me to do Saturday Night Live. And it wasn't just like he asked me. He was courting me. I didn't even know it. He gave me this whole long speech. I was like, all right. And then I read some book about Lorne Michaels starting Saturday Night Live, and I read the speech that he gave Richard Pryor when he wanted him to host the show, and I said, holy shit, that's the same shit he said to me. And I did it. And that was an enormous amount of pressure. It had been 12 years since I had been on television, or since I had even talked to the media. And I remember I signed my Netflix contract on my way to my mark for the monologue. If you do live television, they count down every second. 30 seconds. Are you sure this contract is good? It's good, just sign the paper, it's good. 22 seconds. Oh, nigga, you better not be tricking me. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I walked out on that stage and I killed it. It was natural. It was nothing. It was easy work. Got an Emmy for that one, too. First Emmy I won. And when I walked on the stage, after being in the cold for so long, for the first time when I walked on the stage, I'm like, damn, nigga, I just made $60 million. That's what I thought to myself. It's been great ever since. Really, I could do these specials like Steph Curry. I'd be shooting from inside, outside, all night. It's been great ever since. A lot of my friends are athletes, and I never could understand what it would feel like to only have a limited amount of time to be great. You got 20 years to be the best, or 30 years to be the best. But when you do art, you could be great whenever the will decides that you're great. I feel very lucky for that. And I never forgot this school. I've always come back and checked in. One of my favorite honors was doing the commencement at Ellington. I can't even remember what year it is. I just remember they cheered for me when I came out. I wasn't a big star, but I was their star. And I felt like I was home. After I did Lorne Michaels, after I did Saturday Night Live, Lorne Michaels said something that I got to share with you. He goes, you went to Peggy Caford School, didn't you? That's what he said. And I said, I did. And he said, I want to say to Saturday Night Live, he goes, tell her I owe her money. You know, I never asked to have this theater named after me. Peggy asked me. She was ailing, and I went to her house to visit her. She said, I want you to put your name on the school. She said, it will help us raise money for the school. And to me, it was like, I felt like I'm a little young for that, and I'm still kind of using the name, you know what I mean? Let's see what I do with it first. You never know, Like, imagine if OJ named his son OJ Jr. Oh, Dad. And around then, I was receiving the Mark Twain Prize, huge honor. And the next day, all the artists that came to honor me, the Bradley Coopers and Chris Tuckers and all these great people, came to Ellington and they taught master classes for the students. And Peggy Cooper Capritz, as sick as she was, got out of her bed so she could be with her babies. She never left us. So I did it. Say, you know, whatever you want to do, if I can help, I'll do it. I got to tell you, if you quit a show like Chappelle's show, I don't know if you know what happens to you professionally, but I'll tell you what doesn't happen. They don't just say, well, good luck in your future endeavors. With that media, they beat me up. With their power, they tried to make me behave. It takes a strong person. In 1987, I moved back from Ohio to D.C. and enrolled in Eastern High School and did. You must not have went there when I went there, champ. Those were tough times, is the way I remember it. When I had gone, I'd lived with my father for 3 years. I went to middle school in Ohio, and when I'd gotten back to Washington, the crack epidemic was in full swing, and the city was largely unrecognizable to me. I was an older kid, and kids my age were doing a lot of wild things that I didn't know that kids would do. I'd never seen a kid with a pager before. I didn't know anything about selling drugs or any of that shit. All I knew was every day when I went to Eastern, I didn't feel safe. I'm a quiet guy. Naturally. I'm a shy person, naturally. And I used to get my hair cut on a barbershop in 15th Street Northeast, and I would go there, and everyone in the barbershop would just snap on each other. And I'd sit in the corner, and I'd watch everybody and just listen to all these jokes. The guys were funny as shit, but one day, after a few weeks of going there, getting my hair cut, they turned the jokes on me. I call that day the barbershop massacre. I lit everybody in that barbershop up. I've been sitting in there listening to for weeks talk about each other. I knew every inside joke about each and every one of them, and they couldn't believe I knew. And from then on in the neighborhood, people kind of like me. Oh, those guys. And I came to Duke Ellington, and it was better than I could have ever imagined. I didn't have the suspicion that most new kids get. I was an oddity, a new toy. I was quirky. I wasn't a snappy dresser. I didn't really know what the fuck was going on because the crack epidemic itself was new to me, and they were all refugees from their neighborhood schools. In the morning, we would have our academic classes, and then in the afternoon, we would have our arts classes. It was a long school day. We started at 8:30. We wouldn't leave here till 5, sometimes 5:30, whenever they saw fit. It's funny walking in here tonight, because I saw the pride flags up. And I remember when I came here all those years ago, it's the first time I'd ever met a kid who was just like gay. And was never strange to us. Their sexuality or their gender identity was the least remarkable thing about a person that could dance as well as Roger Bellamy or... There was no distinction between any of that. Everybody was weird in their own way. And in a very strange way, because we spent so much time with one another, we helped raise one another. There's a camaraderie between these students that I don't know that I've seen since I left this school. I can remember, and I won't say names, there was a student that went here that used to sell drugs. It wasn't just a student, but this particular guy. This particular guy did the cardinal no-no on the streets. He did what they call not making your roll, which meant that he got some drugs on consignment and he didn't pay whoever gave him the drugs back. And whoever gave him those drugs had declared, I'm gonna come to that school and I'm gonna kill you, he said. And my man was scared. And the word got around school that the goons was coming. And by the time the goons showed up, every dude that went to this school, gay, straight, whatever the fuck, was all standing out front. They said, you have to kill all of us. And who was in front of all of them? Roger Bellamy with some leg warmers on like this. I started making friends that are still my friends to this very day, lifelong friends. As I get older, I appreciate my teachers more and more. But to tell you the truth, I appreciated them then. Teacher salary is, not necessarily what it should be. And when I think about that, juxtaposed to the dedication that the teachers, the time they would spend to me, the way they would notice, are you okay? Is everything all right? You look sad today. Any little thing, like a family member would. And they fostered an environment of almost absolute trust, like your parents. There's 2 lectures that I got at school that changed the way I do comedy, that turned a light switch on. It was 2 teachers. Donald Lease. Donald Lease, may he rest in peace. Maybe one of the single best educators that I've ever met in my life. He had a demeanor about himself that demanded excellence from his students. He would tell us incredible stories that I didn't believe. He claimed in one class, the song Killing Them Softly was about him. I was like, nah, nigga, not you. He told me he knew Donny Hathaway and Roberta Flack and all these people, these DC legends. He's a humble man, but he really demanded excellence. And he gave us a lecture once on a concept called polarization. Polarization meaning the idea that if you can make everybody look at the same thing at the same time, that their rational mind will decrease and their emotional response will increase. He said that's how audiences work, that's how mobs work, that's how you make a person lose themselves in the crowd. I got it. As he was saying this, he would hold a staple in his hand. It was a good lecture. He said, everyone focus on the staple, and then he would explain to us what polarization is as we're all looking at the staple, and then he'd scream, ha! And everyone would jump, oh! He said, what you scared of? Oh, shit, that works. And ever since he did that lecture, I listened in his class intently. He was one of the only guys that I would always get straight A's from because I worked very hard, not to get his approval, but to avoid his disapproval. When we were coming up, they had a thing called juries. I don't know, do they still do juries? Juries is when all the department heads give you a piece to work on and they sit there and they make you perform the piece, and the criticism is brutal. We were kids. we wouldn't understand that they were preparing us for a hard world ahead. If you wanted a profession in art, they would tear us to shreds. The stress of a jury, and man, I never practiced. Because I didn't want to act. Here, it has happened many, many times since, where someone would intimidate me or scare me and take something that I believe was mine. I'll tell you another story. Now I'm 18 years old. I'm living in New York City, and I just finished my first road tour, which was a very difficult tour. I'll spare you the details. Now I'm back in New York, but my rent is paid, thank God. And I have $60 to my name, and a woman that I had met in Pittsburgh, a bad Dominican bitch, was coming to New York. She was going to spend the weekend with me. I couldn't wait for her to get there. She was coming that evening. But remember, I only had $60 for a whole weekend to entertain a bad bitch. Now I'm walking through Greenwich Village, and I see something I've never seen before. 3-card Monte. You know what that is? Yeah, the guy had the whole thing. The table was set up, and he had the 3 cards, and the crowd was hooting and hollering, and he was like, find the red card, find the red card, and people were playing. Sometimes they win, sometimes they lose, but it was really exciting, and I'm standing there watching it, and I noticed while I'm watching them play this game that the red card, the one you're trying to find, had just a little bend on the corner. And I'm watching it, and I'm like, yo, this guy doesn't seem to know that red card is bent. I'm going to beat this motherfucker. And I walked up to the table, and I said, let me play a hand. And I put my last $60 on that table, and he starts to shuffle and find the red card, find the red card. And I kept watching that bent card go around the table, make sure I kept my eyes on that bent card. And when he stopped shuffling, and he said, find the red card, I pointed to it with confidence. Here it is right here. And he flipped it over, and it was black. And he took my money. I couldn't fucking believe that. How did this nigga do that? Was that magic or sorcery? I was confused. So you know what I did? I sat there, and I watched him for a real long time play the game. And I realized that all those people who was doing all that hooting and hollering and betting, my God, they were his friends. They were in on the whole thing. I felt so wronged. I felt so stupid. And then the next sucker came up to the table and was about to put his money down. And I said, fuck that, man. Don't put your money there. All these niggas is in on it. It's a trick. And when I said that, the guy that was dealing, and this motherfucker was huge, snatched me up by my collar. Feel how strong he was when he grabbed me. I was a skinny little guy. And he was going to maul me. And the only reason he didn't, I'm sure, is because he saw the fear in my face. And that fear, he looked at me. I saw his eyes go from hard to soft. He softened. Then he looked at me like the way a father would look at a child. And he said to me, young man. Yeah. I just remember all the comedians really liked that joke. And there was an older comedian. And he came to me one night after the show, after he saw the joke, and he said, listen, I got an audition at another comedy club, and I was wondering, do you mind if I do that joke? I just want to borrow it. Now, I'm a kid. I don't know any better. I'm like, borrow it? Well, I guess, sure, if it'll help your career. I let him do the joke. And then weeks later, I was waiting to go on in a comedy club, and he went on before me, and he did the joke. And after the show, I pulled him aside, and I said, hey, man, I don't mind you borrowing my jokes, but you got to give them back. He said, oh, I forgot to ask you. He goes, let me buy that joke from you for $50. And I said, man, I'd do it, but I'm just starting out. I need all the material I can get. The idea being that the more material I can accumulate, the faster I'll be able to make money for my work. I said, I can't do it. I want my joke back. I'll never forget this. Remember, I was a 15-year-old child. This guy was a grown-ass man. He stood up over me so I could see how big he was. And he said to me, really? I can just take it. And he did. I got scared because I was a child. But I never forgot that. I never forgot that. I was 15 years old. I'm 47 now. I think about this guy all the time. When I look at my own kids and I see how young and innocent they are, I can't believe someone did that to me. And I don't think about it every day because that was the worst thing that happened to me. I think about it every day because that was the first time that someone ever did that to me. But in my orientation, because the master over there might be nicer. My God, man, I was trapped. You know what? Tell you the truth. Tell you the truth. I've even thought about coming back and doing another Chappelle show. Well, but if I do, I can't call it Chappelle Show because my name and likeness is being used by them in perpetuity throughout the universe. It's in the contract. You're not supposed to do this in my business. I'm up here doing something that nobody else in this business has the balls to do. I'm telling you something that you need to know. I'm trying to explain to you what you're seeing. You don't understand what you're seeing. I am publicly flogging a network. And I know that this network niggas, they watching me and they saying, why are you doing this so publicly? Doesn't feel good to be flogged publicly. Oh, believe me, I know. I know exactly how that feels. When I quit my show, they said I was crazy. What was crazy about it? I just didn't want to do it anymore. They said I smoked crack. That's impossible. I was a devout Muslim. And here we are, all these years later, and they're streaming the very show that I was pitching to them. So I'm asking them, what do you need me for? People think I made a lot of money for Chappelle's show. When I left that show, I never got paid. They didn't have to pay me because I signed the contract. But is that right? I found out that these people were streaming my work and they never had to ask me or they never had to tell me. Perfectly legal because I signed the contract. But is that right? I didn't think so either. That's why I like working for Netflix. I like working for Netflix because when all those bad things happened to me, that company didn't even exist. And when I found out they were streaming Chappelle's show, I was furious. How could they not know? So you know what I did? I called them and I told them that this makes me feel bad. And do you want to know what they did? They agreed that they would take it off their platform just so I could feel better. That's why I fuck with Netflix. Because they paid me my money, they do what they say they're gonna do, and they went above and beyond what you could expect from a businessman. They did something just because they thought that I might think that they were wrong. And I do. I think if you are fucking streaming that show, you're fencing stolen goods. They stole that from me. They just took it. And I'm not up here trying to tell you guys that I believe that Comedy Central gave me a raw deal just because I'm black. I believe that they gave me a raw deal because this fucking industry is a monster. It's the same monster that these Me Too bitches was trying to tell you about. But they hate the monster for how it fucks. And I hate that monster for how it eats. But my God, man, it's the same monster. When I quit the show, all my friends would say, well, fuck them, Dave. Why don't you just do Chappelle's show at another network? Yeah. And why doesn't a slave run from one plantation to a... Don't ever come between a man and his meal. I never forgot that either. Most niggas would have to run the streets for years to learn a lesson that profound. It took me 2 seconds. Never get between somebody and their paper. Taking a man's livelihood away from him is akin to killing him. Do you know why Prince, the famous rock star that was a friend of mine, do you know why he called himself the artist when he came back? He calls himself the artist because that's what they call us in our contracts. Oh, these contracts are crazy. You should hear the terminology they say in these contracts. To use your name and likeness in perpetuity throughout the universe. Who the fuck could possibly know what that means? Nobody does. It's so complicated, in fact, that when you're a kid like me, you have to hire somebody to tell you what that means. And you sit down at a table and you do the contract game. And that's how I got with Comedy Central. I signed the contract. But I signed the contract the way that a 28-year-old expectant father that was broke signs a contract. I was desperate. I needed a way out. And it wasn't good money and it wasn't good circumstances, but what else am I going to do, I said. And all these white people sitting at that table told me, trust us, Dave, it's a good contract. And I looked around the table and they all seemed to agree it was a good contract. But what if it was like that game of three-card Monte? What if they were all friends and I didn't know it? And the bag of money was Iceberg's money in the first place. What was I talking about? What was I trying to tell you? Last week, 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, I call Lauren Michaels and I tell him, okay, I'll do it. I'll do Saturday Night Live on election night. And the day I made that phone call, the day I committed to it, it gets announced that Netflix is streaming Chappelle's show. Not just Netflix. HBO Max is streaming it too. Let me tell you another story about HBO. No, hear me out. Did you know, before Chappelle's show was at Comedy Central, I pitched that show to HBO. I told them what I wanted to do. Now, these are executives. All they have to do is say, yeah, we'll take it, or no, thank you, we won't. But they didn't say either of those things. They went too far. They said, literally, what do we need you for? That's what they told me. As they kicked me out of the office.